This is the biggest thing that's going to occur in the next election cycle, is this referendum in 2023. Look, from the heart, it's going to be very emotional. A referendum for constitutional recognition of Indigenous Australians. Well, they're already recognised in that they can vote under the Constitution. Now, the build-up to this referendum that's coming is this statement. It's what is an Indigenous voice to Parliament and the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Again, it's all sounding very emotional. It's made up of three clearly defined aspects. Number one is a voice. It's a mechanism for the First Nations people to be heard by government. Well, there's no indications that they aren't being heard by government, so that seems redundant. Now we get into it. Treaty is a formal agreement between the Commonwealth and First Nation people. We're starting to go down a slippery slope here. And truth is the telling and recognition of the First Nation story, recognition being the most important word. Now, the first stage was the statement. The second stage is it calls for the establishment of a Makarrata Commission. Makarrata meaning coming together after a struggle. Well, what struggle? Hasn't been a struggle for a long time. So the struggle clearly is over because it says after a struggle. And when we look at where the Indigenous community is, they get quite favourable treatment as it is, as far as education and university entrance and healthcare. They get a lot of advantages already. So what could they possibly want now that affects the Constitution as far as outcomes? Further on, it says it is unclear what constitutional legal consequences would flow from such an agreement or a treaty between governments. Well, I'm pretty sure there are some planned consequences that they're just saying are unclear. And it's going to be, the devil is going to be in the wording. And what they're going to do is they've got the three aspects, the voice, the treaty, and the truth. But the media are only going to focus on, don't you want to give them a voice? It's all going to be, and if you can't vote for one and not the other two, you'll have to vote for all three. So the marketing campaign is going to be all emotional. Don't you want to give them a voice? Well, they already have a voice. Now, Google search of Australian Referendum 2023 comes up with this result, and it's the Truth and Integrity Project. And there's a date, 16th of the 5th, 2022, only about a week or so ago. And when you click on the link, you get page not found, error 404. Now, it's only 16th of the 5th. It's not like it's a 10-year-old web page. It's been taken down pretty hastily because it hasn't been up that long. And it's not like they've just walked away from it. Oh, just leave the web page up. I'm pretty sure their subscription to whatever web hosting didn't expire within that short period of time. So this was definitely taken down. But why was it taken down? Now, it didn't appear on the Wayback Machine, but it was cached by Google, the entire page. And I've got a link I did a print screen of the whole page. It's a PDF, so you can read the whole thing. And this is an extract from that whole page. And this is what jumped out at me. This means that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders are included in the lawmaking process rather than having bureaucrats and politicians deciding what's best for them. Now, it's interesting the language they use, deciding what is best for them. Well, that sounds wrong, doesn't it? But really, what they're doing is they're making law under Section 51 of the Constitution, hopefully, supposedly for good government. We're going to keep an eye on them. But what that does is it makes out like that process is wrong. But that's what the rest of Australia and them up until this point in time have been under, representative democracy. Now, they've already got advantages for the Indigenous people, and I think justifiably in some cases, particularly for education and for healthcare and for housing. But they don't specify here, well, on top of that, what are they going to get if they get involved in the lawmaking process? Because these advocacy groups pretty much get anything that they ask for already from the bureaucrats that are supposedly deciding what is best for them, and they get plenty of recognition. We've got the NRL Indigenous round, and there's plenty of memorial days and ceremonies. So recognition isn't a problem, and the outcomes that they're getting isn't a problem. So if there's nothing above and beyond what they're getting from this Constitution, then it's a bit like BLM. It's not for who they say it's for. It's got to be for somebody else. Now, it was mentioned in the other article, not in this one that's been taken down, which doesn't seem too palatable to a lot of people. It's that it's unclear of the constitutional legal flow on effects. But what this does, it's not so much about, well, it's giving really someone outside of this situation a benefit in that it relegates So you see, now this is a change to the Constitution. So if you agree to it, right, if the Aboriginals are included in a lawmaking process rather than representative democracy, they are essentially a higher authority than the rest of us under the Constitution. So think about that. Under the Constitution, the elector is the highest authority, and government is meant to, under representative democracy, serve us. Although we found through COVID they use double speak, which you can bet is going to be in these referendum questions, where they can interpret one way in one situation and another way. Well, we got your consent outside of the Constitution. Well, a lot of that is going to be going on with this referendum that's coming up. Now, until the wording of the questions, which is not going to be straightforward, and the media are only going to focus on the emotional side of it, I can't really see exactly how they're going to do it, but it's not for the Aboriginal people. They're already getting everything they want. It's certainly not for us. So it's got to be for someone outside of us and the Aborigines. Now, remember that it's a treaty between First Nations people and the Commonwealth of Australia. So the outcome of that treaty, supposedly under the Constitution, if we give consent to it, will put the Aboriginal nation as a higher authority than us. And indeed, there can really only be one nation on a land. And if you're a subordinate to that, you are an occupied people. So if you just want to look at what happens to occupied people, just take a look at what's going on over in the Holy Lands over there with the Palestinians. And I'm not saying that immediately that's what's going to happen, but this is just administratively. We're going to be moved out. Now, some people have already come to the conclusion that might have already happened with the Commonwealth of Australia, but the fact that they want to change the Constitution, that could be the final step in that. So they've got our consent to be outside of the Constitution, say, by our birth certificates and everything. But what this would do would block any way back to being on this land as not as occupiers, not as being occupied, but as being the highest authority on this land. That is what I think this is about. Hence, now if you go to that, if you go to the link to the PDF, you'll see the names of all the people that are involved with this that have all been suddenly wiped off the internet. So they thought, luckily the case was there. So next year, I just thought I'd do this video now. Just keep this in mind, that's what I think. That can only be, it has to benefit someone outside of the Aboriginals and us. Because I'm not going to go over that again, but I've already explained how that is. So that's what I think this is about. Now, it appears 2023 is a big year for referendums around, particularly to do with the United Kingdom and us as a former British colony, because we've got the Irish unity referendum, Scottish independence vote. Now, this referendum on tax, don't they just make tax law? Why would they need a referendum on it? Now, I haven't looked into this as far as New Zealand goes, but it would sound like it's got something to do with their constitution as well. I have to find it again. There was actually a court decision that it was back in the 1870 something that determined once and for all that this land was look, I actually think that was an invasion, but back then they called it settlings. Look to the Middle East, eh? Was that an invasion or settling? But so that sort of officially made it, and I think that this referendum under our constitution seeks to overturn that ruling and return it back, well, to a nation which is a lot more easily controlled. They're only a small numbers of people, and the bankers and the foreigners have a lot more control over a small number of people than all of us, and they can use that control. So I'm not saying the Aborigines are in on this. It's a bit like I said, the BLM. I think in the long run, they're going to be not as beneficial. It's not going to be as good for them in the long run, maybe in the short term. But these, World Economic Forum, you will own nothing and you will be happy. Well, that applies to the Aborigines as well. So they're going to keep that in mind. Anyway, just thought I'd put this one up. That's it for this one.